What's up with the good people? Now you officially riding the jungle wave. I'm your host, Uptown Black, behalf of myself and my brother, Fresh 1000, Free 1K, be home soon. Y'all gonna have to get used to us. It ain't gonna be your typical, Bengal centric podcast. We like to keep it raw. Um, I'm gonna just jump right into it, man. I ain't got a lot of time. So it's finally happened. It finally did it. We can finally stop talking about it. The curse has been lifted. If that's what you want to go with. The curse of Bo Jackson, Cincinnati sports curse, whatever we doing. Me personally, I don't believe in sports curses. Um, I'm more of an X's and O's type of guy, and that includes in the front office just as much as it involves being on the field. So, my opinion, basically, the Bengals. This is the first playoff win that the Bengals have had in 31 years because the way the team had been managed the prior 31 years just wasn't gonna get it done. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not, I ain't gonna dump on the guys. This is time for celebration. I'm just as happy as everybody else. Long time, long suffering, lifelong Bengals fan. I'm born and raised Cincinnati, Ohio. I ain't never rooted for no other team because they was, when they was bad. You know what I mean? Who they out there every day. Anyway, right? But that being said, it's been a long time since I really been upset about the Bengals not being any good or not being better than mediocre consistently for the simple fact that I understand how the business of football works. You know what I'm saying? So I've watched other organizations that used to be bottom feeders themselves. They put certain people in certain positions. They start moving a certain way. They start having more sustained success, right? Bigger success, right? And it's cyclical like anything else. So, what goes up must come down, and what have you. But to me, this ain't never been about no curse. This ain't never. Like I said, I don't really believe in that type of shit. Not when it come to sports. Like, you know what I'm saying? But it's the drought is over because the Bengals. It's crazy to say this. It's been times in my life where I really never thought that I would be able to say these words, but the Bengals have finally started to move like an NFL franchise that wants to win. Like, yes, we can talk about how Mike Brown has managed the team, from the early 90s versus how they've been moving the last couple of years. We can talk about what contributes to that as far as, with him allowing more responsibility to the people who run the business end of the organization, right? The people who, in between the office and the field, if you will. But ultimately, it's like doing a donut on a battleship, right? But they've changed the way that they move. You look at the money that they spent on the defensive side of the ball in the last 2 to 3 off seasons. That's not something they would have ever done in the past. So, letting other people essentially make business decisions that are based on the pursuit of a championship versus trying to make sure we make money, right? Mike Brown allowing other people to finally do these things is finally starting to pay off and show results, right? So it's not about no curse. It's about they finally started. It's a copycat league. You'll hear that from any analyst, anytime you listen to a game, watch ESPN, whatever. It's a copycat league. The Bengals just never been one of them teams to copycat nothing, even if it worked, right? So they gonna do what they was gonna do it, how they was gonna do it. But they have evolved. So it's finally coming together. You know what I'm saying? Like what we seeing now, I don't think it's a flash in the pan. If you look at how this roster is built, the way that the front office is being managed now at this point, now that more so his kids running the show than him himself, right? I think this is not what Marvin Lewis dealt with. Because one thing I want to be clear about is, yes, there came a time where it was time for Marvin Lewis to go. But the fact of the matter is, he laid the majority of the concrete of the foundation of what you're seeing now. Marvin Lewis was the first person to make them change the way they do business at all. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to Marv, But so the bottom line is what you're seeing now. I think, they're one of the youngest teams in the league. And if they can once they fix their interior offensive line and they add some pass rush, I don't think that it'll be any question as to whether or not they'll be one of the top 2 to 4 teams in the AFC every year, especially if they are now. You know what I mean? Yeah, like I said, I'm not a curse guy. I'm an X's and O's guy. So we're going to get into this game, right? So one thing they did Saturday that they hadn't been known for this season, or as a Zach Taylor coach team, period, they got off to a fast start. Scored a touchdown on their first drive. I don't think they had a drive in the first half that didn't end in points. So, based on the fact that they never trailed after the Raiders' first field goal, I mean, you can say that getting off to a fast start saved them. And it needed to. The issue was, for me, right, they got off to a fast start, but they left too many points on the table. When you're not playing against a dominant defense, your defense and your special teams give you 2 possessions that start in plus territory, and you have a drive from the 45 and a strip sack that gets you the ball at your opponent's 15, and that opponent is giving up red zone touchdowns 80% of the time that their defense is forced into the red zone. You can't come away from that, especially against better teams. You can't come away from that, with a touchdown and 2 field goals, right? Like, at the end of that first half, the Raiders come down and score a touchdown going into halftime, which made it a game again. And granted, yeah, you had 2 whole quarters left anyway. But the truth of the matter is, the touchdown that they scored made it 20-13. It really should have been 20-6, 28, at least 28-6 before then, right? They back should have already been broken, right? So, that's something that they're going to have to clean up, because what'll start to happen is the defenses will start to adopt that bend but don't break type of mentality. Like, we're going to let them get down here inside the 25, the 20, because they ain't, they can't punch it in the red zone. So that can't continue to be an issue, because against better teams, you're going to pay for that. You know what I'm saying? And again, I don't want to dump on the guys. It's NFL playoff football. They did their thing. You know what I'm saying? I ain't taking nothing from nothing that they've accomplished or anything. But if we talking about championships, which this is the conversation that you really looking at how they got to where they're at, how they played. One thing that we gotten used to as Cincinnati Bengals fans is that even when the team was good, they would start to crumble at the same time every year, where the good team, where the cream rises to the crop, where the cream rises to the top. You know what I'm saying, so to speak. They would start to fall apart no matter how good of a season they had to begin in September and October. December and January, they won shit. Like, that's just what we was used to, right? So at the end of the day, you look at where they're at now, right? You look at the way Burrow has played when it has mattered the most, right? You look at the fact that they went and took the division by beating at the time number one seed in the conference, right? In a gotta have it game. So when you start doing those type of things, now the championships is the conversation that you have to have. But in light of that conversation, what you can't have is you can't have a 50% red zone touchdown um, conversion percentage when you playing for championships, right? And yeah, granted, like especially at this point, they playing with house money. They a year ahead of schedule. Nobody expected them to be where they are now until at least next year. That's granted. But the conversation got to be championships now, because at worst, you're two or three pieces away. Interior line, pass rush, right? But speaking of which, because your pass rush is not where it need to be, right? And your interior O-line is what it is, kind of, and we all know it, right? One thing that you can't have is, and this ain't a dump on my man, I rock with him, but one thing you can't have is you can't have the type of games that T. Higgins had on Saturday. If T. Higgins has a half of a T. Higgins type of game that we know he's capable of, that game ain't never close, right? And as far as Joe Mixon, to some degree, he's hamstrung by that interior O line. It ain't no way around it. You know what I mean? Ain't two ways about it. Until they get that at least halfway fixed. Don't get me wrong, he already is Joe Mixon. But until they get, what should I say this? Once they get it halfway fixed, we'll be talking about Joe Mixon as one of the best one or two, maybe three running backs in the league. Because that's really what he is when you look at what he's working with that O-line. That being said, got to get the Raiders ain't a dominant defense in neither the run nor the pass. You know what I mean? So you got to do better than Joe Mixon having a quiet night. Granted, you can kind of tell that the Raiders' strategy was, okay, yeah, I think Jamar Chase is yeah, I think he got it like that. Then show us. Beat us with, we going to take away everybody else and beat us with Jamar Chase. Yeah. See how that went. But at the end of the day, you still need more from these skill positions than you got Saturday. Because to be real, it's like this. The Raiders, I don't want to take nothing from them. The level of adversity that they seen this season, unmatched. Ruggs, Arnett, Gruden. I think maybe to some degree they were inspired late by the death of John Madden or whatever. And long live coach, right? But they weren't a team. They belonged slightly more than the Steelers. If you ask me, the fact that they had to survive their defense giving up like 5 fourth down conversions on one drive, I kind of feel like they didn't belong as much as the Chargers, but the Chargers, you know, they fell apart. I used to call them Bengals West. That's another story for another day. But nah, man, like I said, the truth of the matter is the Raiders wasn't really on the level to where this game should have been as close as it was. Again, not dumping on nothing. I'm happy who they and everything, but the game shouldn't have been as close as it was given who they was facing. And part of that is because the interior O line can't. It's too hard. Mixon got to do all the work. That's why they run the ball to the outside so much because the tackles are solid and the scheme is solid to do so. But at the end of the day, the the interior line, man, they don't really give him a two-way go of it like that. So that's something you're gonna have to deal with. But T. Higgins can't have, a drop touchdown, a drop first down, and then, one catch for 10 yards. Jamar Chase is Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow, but this offense is built around teams having to make contingencies for all three. And again, if we talking championships, when you get against Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs, Tom Brady in the playoffs, Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, and now Josh Allen in the playoffs from what it looked like, right? You're going to need 31 or better. You're going to need 31 or better. 26 ain't going to cut it against the guys who you really got to get through. And in order for that to happen, man, the Migos got to be the Migos. You know what I'm saying? You got to find a way. And again, the Raiders is not one of them defenses where it's like, all right, we take away everybody else and put it all on one guy. They can be beat like that. So what that tell you is you got defenses that's able to, play balanced and make every, not necessarily take away nobody, but make everybody have to be on their A game that day. And Higgins had the type of game he have, and you can't get the run game going consistently. Boyd had a touchdown, but he only had 4 catches for 26 yards. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so when if that's how it go, you're gonna run into trouble. But like I said, it's not a good problem to have, but it's you would say first world pains. You would call it first world pains because it's championship deficiencies rather than just competitive deficiencies, which being a lifelong, long suffering Bengals fan, we more than familiar with competitive deficiency. So it's still a different feel. Like I said, from where they at right now, they more or less playing with house money, in my opinion, because they're a year ahead of schedule now. They couldn't, curses or droughts aside, they couldn't come out here and lose to the Raiders. No disrespect to the Raiders again, but with the roster they got, the level they've been playing to, they couldn't come out and lose to the Raiders and it'd be cool. But now that they done got that monkey off the city back, you can say, like, okay, now they playing with house money, right? Mm. Um, but you got to get more from T. Higgins, and you got to get that interior O line together, fix that run game. Next, the other thing you got to get together is you got to get that pass rush complete. Like right now, it's like Trey Hendrickson doing it all on his own with a little bit of cleanup from Sam Hubbard. I don't want to take nothing from Hubbard, but he ain't getting home. He making other plays, batted balls, XYZ pressures, and he getting home sometime too. But it's like this: Before Trey Hendrickson, mind you, the Raiders O line ain't too much better. They about pretty much the same as the Bengals O line. But before Trey Hendrickson and Larry Ogunjobi went out, they was pressuring Derek Carr at like 43%, 44%, something like that. Them two guys went down and it went down to 9%, which means you're not getting no pass rush from damn near nobody else on the roster. Again, not complaining as far as this year, but we talking about championship deficiencies. So that's one of them. That being said, I think the back end of their defense, from the linebackers to the safeties, creeping into that territory where they one of the most underrated, most underappreciated. Because, like, if you look at down the stretch, starting really with like what they did with Kansas City, the back end of that defense been playing. Jesse Bates he hasn't had the year that you want to have when you grade out as a top five player, then the following year is a contract year, top five player at your position. He hasn't had that type of year, but he had that type of game Saturday. Um, and a lot of them guys have had that type of game at least once or twice down the stretch. So I think from a defensive standpoint, I think with Gaither coming back next year, um, and you bring Apple back like you need to, you bring Trey Flowers back like you need to. When you look at what one thing that he's helped to cure, at least it seems, the tight ends, they still get theirs when they play the Bengals, but tight ends, since they added that, they picked him up and they added that wrinkle to their defense with that corner cover skill, but with safety size, right? Pardon me. They haven't been getting crushed by tight ends the way that we used to. In fact, Kelsey didn't really get off. He had a touchdown, but he didn't really get off. I think with how they look at linebacker, safety, and corner, I think the only really place that they really need, where they got to spend some money on in free agency, is they need one more pass rusher. Like, it was a very, very small sample size that we got the first 2-3 quarters of the first preseason game or whatever it was, but Joseph Osai did have 2 sacks on Tom Brady against the Buccaneers ones, for what it's worth, in the first game of the preseason. So, again, grain of salt, preseason, vanilla offense, all that. But if you spend some money on another pass rusher and you got Osai in the rotation and he's half of what he looked like in that small sample size, your defense is good to go. And, maybe you find a corner that you can add for depth, but I really think the way Eli Apple is played, you gotta give him a decent little bit amount of money to lock him in at least for 2 or 3 seasons. You know what I mean? Obviously not a tier one or even maybe a tier two corner side, but you got to give him a fair starter salary and a little bit of security, 3-4 years. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna say at least in the neighborhood of excuse me. You got to give him at least in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 million a year. If on the least maybe 2-3 years, whatever. If you can get away with 2, but I think it take 3. But they almost there, man. Like legitimately, like I said, not looking at it like you know like they ready this year because they won a playoff game. There's still a lot more left to be done, and I think they still got deficiencies that can bite them in the ass against the best of the best. But I think they can beat Tennessee this weekend. Um, some of that is going to depend on whether or not they can get Hendrickson back out of concussion protocol. But I wouldn't take it out I wouldn't discount that from the possibilities. We match up good against Tennessee. In fact, we beat them pretty convincingly last year when we had no offense essentially. So, you know, we can. That's one. That's one they can take. Now, we'll go ahead and get out of here in a second, but you know what we got to talk about. You know we got to talk about it. The officiating. Because one thing we going to have to hear for the next however long, especially from Raiders fans, is, oh, they gave y'all the game. Da, 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 da. Right? So, my thing is, with the obvious, with the main thing that everybody going to talk about, the bad whistle. Right? Okay. So, it's a simple question. Do you want them to do the correct thing or do you want them to do the right thing, right? Because if we talking about the play being decided on the field by the players, not the refs, is one thing you cannot deny, you cannot run away from, right? Two things, but really one thing, right? One thing for sure that you can't get around is the fact that if the ref blew a whistle at an incorrect time, it was 22 players on the field that either heard it or didn't hear it. Either way, the jersey they was wearing didn't dictate whether or not they heard the whistle. In layman's terms, if the whistle messed the Raiders up, the whistle also messed the Bengals up. That being said, you saw the replay. The man had a half a yard between his foot and the sideline. So there's no way that the ref should have blown the whistle, whether he did or not. So is your argument really going to be that the Raiders got screwed? The Raiders got screwed because the refs attempted, intentionally, not intentionally, who cares, right? The refs either attempted to or almost accidentally screwed the Bengals. And so because they didn't blow a play dead that shouldn't have been blown dead, we got to hear people cry about all this inadvertent whistle, da 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 da, right? Da, da, the Raiders would have won if it wasn't for that, which is the most ridiculous argument. But them same people don't want to talk about the fake timeout on a play where it's first and 15 at maybe the 35 or 40. Play results in a catch inside the 11, 12 yard line. They grant the Raiders a timeout that they called in order to avoid a 12 men on the field penalty. When at the time of the snap, which was when dude number 29 first started trying to get the timeout, you can see the flag and the 12th man still on the field. They not only grant him a timeout, don't assess the penalty for that a flag was thrown for, take away the play, and miss a roughing the passer penalty, right? So instead of it being two fouls on the defense, 12 men on the field, penalty declined, roughing the passer, penalty accepted, half the distance to the goal line, first and goal, Cincinnati at the 5.5, 6 yard line, it ends up being first and 15 again from the 35 or so, 30 yard line, whatever. That play, or maybe it was the 25-yard line, something like that. That series ended in a field goal because of a ridiculously bad call. Nobody wants to talk about that though, right? Yes, the rest was trash. Jerome Boger's crew was always trash. The fact that they even got a playoff game in the first place is weird to me. But the bottom line is everybody was affected by their trash officiating. It happens to. I mean, you want to say it happens to everybody because nothing happened to them. Other than nothing out of the ordinary. Bad calls get made, and it's just funny. It's funny listening to people talk about the NFL wants. They going out of their way to push the Bengals forward. Like when has that ever been a thing? Like nobody cares. It's a you know, a bunch of calls that went bad in a close game officiated by a terrible crew. This type of discussion was gonna happen one way or the other, right? So at the end of the day, like I said from the beginning, I don't believe in curses. What that means is this form of the Cincinnati Bengals that you're seeing right now is here to stay, at least for the next. It's a quarterback driven league, dog. They're gonna be here for at least another 8 to 10 years, man. Even once they gotta pay Joe Burrow and they can't afford certain. I mean, they salary cap ain't out of whack now. Actually, if they part with Trey Waynes, they gonna have like 65 million in cap space this offseason as a team that made it at least to the divisional round of the playoffs and could possibly be a AFC championship contender or better. They beat Kansas City. And I think the only other real threat in the AFC, honestly, is Buffalo. Tennessee might make me eat that, no homo. But at the end of the day, you know what I'm saying. We gonna see these guys for a while because they're not just relying solely on talent and that whole Dalton Green run was essentially them hitting in the middle and the end of the draft until they had to pay people. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, the drought is over with. Bengals here to stay. They one of the youngest teams in the league. I'm not one to emotionally say, they gonna win the Super Bowl. Da, da, da. But they Super Bowl window is legitimately open for at least the next 3 to 4 seasons. It just is what it is. Who knows what'll happen? But it's their time. Um, like I said, man, long suffering Bengals fan, born and raised in this city. So yes, it's a major thing for the city, but for the organization, well, major thing for the organization too, but for the team, the locker room, the coaching staff, it's still meat left on the bone because like I said, they're a season or two. They really, I say, a season away from being legitimate Super Bowl contenders, and nobody thought it would be that. So this might be one of them things that lasts for a long, long time. Regardless of whatever, it's who they, all day, every day, any more way. You feel me? You riding this jungle wave, Uptown Black. That's it. Free Fresh 1000, man. My brother be home in a minute. I'm gonna get with y'all.